السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وأسلم على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما نافعا. آمين. In Islamic ethics, we are doing a selected reading from Tahdhib al-Akhlaq of a great scholar and polymath, Al-Imam Thabit ibn Sinan ibn Thabit ibn Qurra, who was a court physician of the Abbasid Khulafa. This work is one of the early engagements with the question of ethics. And as we have seen in the previous session, that Al-Imam Thabit ibn Sinan rahimahullah involved medical science and other ulum in understanding the question of ethics, because primarily he was a doctor. He was an expert of medicine. And from the contribution of the Muslim scholars in this field, we can easily deduce that we as Muslims understand the ethical question or the principles of ethics, or what we call meta-ethics, in a deeper manner than the West. The ethical question is more complex for the Western man, because in the West, they don't involve God and religion and the deeper conditions of the nafs, deeper conditions of the human soul in understanding ethics. They have their nazariyat, principles and theories. Inshallah, we'll point to them whenever we need. But when we separate God, religion, and deeper understanding of the conditions of the nafs from this field, it becomes more complex. So from this work and other works of the Muslim scholars, it becomes clear that ethics for us was a very simple matter, which could be, or the ethical question, or what we call meta-ethics, could be founded on two important foundations. Number one, religion. Religion for us plays pivotal role in understanding all affairs. And in religion, we involve God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in understanding the moral philosophy. And number two, deeper conditions of the nafs. Not only taking the physical condition of a human being into consideration, but going beyond that and involving the deeper conditions of the nafs. And you will see this has been taken seriously by Al-Imam Thabit ibn Sinan in this work, when he divides nafs into three types. And these are human conditions. The soul is same, but these are the different conditions of the nafs. النفس الناطقة, النفس الغضبية, and النفس البهيمية, or what he calls الشهوانية. The nafs, which is the source of intellect, thinking, nutq. The nafs, which is the source of anger, or the potential of defending ourselves, self-esteem, and other qualities, which he calls al-ghadabiyya, ghadab, anger. And an-nafs ash-shahwaniyya, the nafs which is the source of desires, which includes the desire of eating and drinking, the desire of fulfilling the sexual desire from our wives, so on and so forth. So he tries to understand the question of ethics based on these three conditions of the nafs. And also, he does not neglect the physical reality of a human being. That's why he involved medicine. He says the mizaj of a human being, the temperament of a human being, which is based on what he eats, what he drinks, where he lives, the climate of the place where he dwells, and what is going on in his life. All these factors, they contribute to the mizaj, temperament. It also affects the ethics of a human being. So we can say Islamic ethics is a blend of three matters: understanding the physical reality of a human being, the inner, deeper human conditions of the nafs, and religion, which we claim that we have the purest form of religion, which comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly through his prophets. So let us move further in this text and try to understand the fawaid. As we have said, we cannot do a complete reading of this text. It will take time. We are taking fawaid. الباب الثاني, the second chapter, is about في معرفة أصول الأخلاق والشرح أحوال هذه الأصول. Understanding the principles of akhlaq and explanation of the conditions of these principles. وأفعالها والفضائل فيها. وهي نظير الصحة في البدن والرذائل وهي نظير المرض فيه. And understanding the fadail, the virtues, the good qualities, which resembles health in the physical body. Like the physical body, we call it healthy when all conditions, physical conditions, have come to a balance. والرذائل, and understanding the vices, evil qualities, وهي نظير المرض فيه, and they resemble the sickness in the human body. And then he quotes Galen, Jalinus, his famous definition. We talked about this and how the Muslim scholars benefited from other civilizations. فيقول أن جالينوس وفي ذلك فنقول إن جالينوس وصف الأخلاق. He says Galen is the first scholar who gave a definition or who defined أخلاق. فقال إن الخلق حال النفس داعية الإنسان إلى أن يفعل أفعال النفس بلا روية ولا اختيار. خلق, ethics or manners, is the condition of the nafs. Now this is a very problematic statement for modern Western reality, because it does not believe in nafs. And the modern Western psychology also faces this dilemma. It does not believe in the soul. And even if it believes, it does not go beyond physical explanation of the nafs, or explaining the nafs connected with the physical reality. We're not going beyond that. But the early Greek philosophers defined akhlaq based on condition of the nafs, because they believed in the soul. And this is a different discussion. So in this chapter, he talks about the usul of akhlaq, the principles of akhlaq, based on understanding the deeper conditions of the nafs, in which he divides the nafs into three types, or these are the three main potentials of the nafs in which we have to acquire or attain balance. So, for example, he says here, وكلام جالينوس في أول كتابه في الأخلاق. Galen, in his book in أخلاق, in the beginning of his book about أخلاق, يدل على أنه يعتقد أن الأخلاق إنما يصدر عن النفسين البهيميتين. So if we reflect on the kalam of Jalinus in the beginning of his book, it suggests that he believed that akhlaq comes from, or the source of akhlaq are the two conditions of the nafs, which are bahimiyatayn, which are animal conditions, or the desires, faqat, only. Now here, he may resemble the modern Western engagement in akhlaq, because they don't go beyond the physical conditions or the qualities which are closely related to the physical condition. So he says, Galen, he believed that the source of akhlaq are the two conditions of the nafs, which are both animal conditions or the desires. فقط, only. وما يصدر عن النفس الناطقة, and what is concluded from the nafs al-natiqa. Nafs al-natiqa is the intellect. تسميه روية واختيار وربما سماه أخلاقا. He does not always call it akhlaq. He sometimes calls it ikhtiyar or rawiya. As we said, akhlaq is the qualities, acquiring the good qualities without extra effort and thinking. So he separates an-nafs al-natiqa from the two nufus. Again, the discussion is based on understanding these three conditions of the nafs. An-nafs al-natiqa is the intellect. An-nafs al-ghadabiyya is the condition which is foundation of anger, self-esteem, respect. And the third condition of the nafs is al-bahimiyya, animal condition, which resembles animals in desire of eating and drinking, and also the sexual desire. So he says, فَيَكُونُ أُصُولُ الْأَخْلَاقِ عَلَى هَذَا الْمَذْهَبِ. If we take this position, based on it, the usul of akhlaq, the principles of akhlaq, can be divided into three. وهذا الرأي ثلاثة أصول أحدها بحسب أصل مسكنه القلب. The first will be the base of akhlaq, or the home of akhlaq, the foundation of akhlaq, which is the heart. Okay, and in that we will have different qualities: al-hamiyya, al-anfa, al-ghadab, al-shahwa, and all these qualities, anger, desire, they lead to some important physical qualities, manifestations. So he says, for example, these qualities, lirriyasa, for status. These are the qualities which lead to status, or the love for status. Mahabbatul intiqam, or the love of revenge. Okay. What tusamma an-nafs al-ghadabiyya. This can be called an-nafs al-ghadabiyya, the condition of the nafs, which is anger, or the desire of ghalaba, the desire of power, the desire of status, or mahabbatul intiqam, or revenge. All these desires, they sprout from this nafs, which is called a nafsul ghadabiyya. So the maskan, the source of this first human condition, or the condition of the nafs, is al-qalb, the heart. وَأَصْلٌ ثَانٍ وَمَسْكَنُهُ الْكَبِدِ. The second principle, or the second type of akhlaq, its source is al-kabid, the liver. Yani, this is according to the advancement in medical sciences and the knowledge which was prevalent in their times. We can disagree with many facts in our times. However, you can still see that the scholars, particularly the Muslim scholars, were far ahead of their times in explaining these matters. He says, the second type, وَمَسْكَنُهُ الْكَبِدِ وَتُسَمَّى النَّفْسُ الشَّهْوَانِيَّةِ. It is called nafsu shahwaniyya, the condition of the nafs, which is the foundation or the source of desires. Its maskan, its source or its foundation is al-kabid, the liver. وَسَمَّاهُ قَوْمٌ النَّفْسِ النَّبَاتِيَّةِ. Some scholars have also called it النفس النباتية, which resembles the plants, لأنهم يذكرون مشاكلتها لقوة في النبات, and so on and so forth. The third is, so the source of shahwa, the source of physical desires, eating and drinking, and the sexual desire and other physical desires, its source is the liver, or this nafs, an-nafsu shahwaniya, which is in the liver. Okay, and he has beautifully explained how these three nufus, or how these three conditions of the nafs, they work together in the guidance of an-nafs al-natiqa. If an-nafs al-natiqa, intellect, or the potential of intellect takes over these two nufus, everything remains in a balance. However, if one of these nufus, whether it's an-nafs al-ghadabiyya or an-nafs al-shahwaniyya, takes over the intellect, the quality of intellect, in that case, imbalance occurs and a person may fall into evils. So he has explained it here and also in other places. So he calls it وَأَحْوَالُ الْأَقْلِ كُلُّهَا. So he says, for example, here, in explaining the difference of opinion between the philosophers about these nufus. Yes. وَقَالَ قَوْمٌ مِنَ الْفَلَاسِفَةِ. Some philosophers have said, إِنَّ النَّفْسَ وَاحِدَةٌ. The nafs is only one, but these are different potentials and quwa. These are different powers and potentials of the same nafs. The source of fikr, the source of thought, thinking, understanding, memory, memorization, imagination, and all conditions of aql, intellect, kulluha huwa min ad-dimagh. They are all based in the brain, the mind. دون سائر أعضاء البدن. وأمر الغضب والحمية والأنفة وما شاكلها, anger, self-esteem, and all these desires, كلها من القلب. They are in the heart. دون غيره, and not in other parts of the body. And shahwa is في الكبد. Shahwa, desire, is in the liver. So on and so forth. Yani he was aware of the developments in medical science and in this field in his times. He says, وَأَمَّا الْأَصْلُ الثَّالِثُ, the third principle, فَهُوَ قِيَاسُ هَذِي الْأَنفُسِ. It is analogy between these three anfus, between these three potentials of the nafs. الثلاثة بعضها إلى بعض. So, qiyas, understanding the qualities based on analogy between the three, how they work together, and the al-nafs al-natiqa, the intellectual or the quwwa of intellect should take precedence and guide other two nufus, and create a balance in an-nafs al-ghadabiyya and nafs al-shahwaniyya. Then he discusses this in detail, how based on this analogy we can understand different human conditions and things. And he's only talking about the principles. He does not go into all the details. He said this is out of the scope of this book. However, if we understand the basics and the foundations, then we apply analogy in understanding all these three nufus together, we can reach unlimited number of results, and we can reach deeper understanding of the human conditions. So for example here he says ثم جعل تبارك وتعالى النفس الناطقة رقيبا عليهما. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made النفس الناطقة, the condition of the aql, intellect, رقيبا عليهما, a guardian over these two, over النفس الغضبية and النفس الشهوانية. He says the balance happens when النفس الناطقة is the guide. Aql is the guide. So here again he quotes Jalinus. He says وقد يجوز على ما أتى به جالينوس أخيرا من تشبيه ما يصدر عن النفس الناطقة أخلاقا أيضا. We can conclude from the last discussion of Galen that he understands or considers what is based on النفس الناطقة, the potential of intellect, also akhlaq. It can also be called akhlaq أيضا. And based on that, we can conclude that the usul of akhlaq, the principles of akhlaq are four. Number one, ما يصدر عن النفس الناطقة, what is based on the qualities. Of course, the manifestation will be in action, the actualization. What is based on النفس الناطقة, the potential of intellect. الناطقة, nutuk here means the capability of thinking, aql. Like in the definition of a human being, the logicians, scholars of mantiq, they say a human being is حيوان ناطق. He is حيوان, but ناطق, who has the capability of thinking. So what differentiates us from the animal world? We are part of the animal world, but what differentiates us from others is the quality of aql. الثاني ما يصدر عن النفس الغضبية. The second is what is based on النفس الغضبية, the quality of anger, self-esteem, pride. والثالث ما يصدر عن النفس الشهوانية. The third is what is based on النفس الشهوانية, the nafs, which is the foundation of desires. والرابع, which is the most important, قياس هذه الأنفس بعضها إلى بعض. Analogy between these three. So based on these three analogy, يعني, in some people there will be a balance. النفس الناطقة will be at the top, in control of the other two. In some people, النفس الغاضبة, غضبية, will be in control of النفس الناطقة and النفس الشهوانية. It will, of course, lead to different results, different manifestation in his actions. In some others, النفس الشهوانية may be in the lead. It may be in the control of النفس الناطقة and النفس الغضبية. So based on this analogy, we can understand different forms of akhlaq. It can lead to different results. And he has involved many Greek philosophers and scientists in understanding this. For example, he quotes Aristotle here. He says, ويكون قد وافق أرسطوطلس فيما حكي أن من اعتقاده أنه وإن كانت الأخلاق النفسين البهيميين فقد يشوب النفس الناتجة منها شيء. So in this, he agrees with Aristotle, or Aristotle agrees with Galen, that in spite of the fact that akhlaq are primarily based on these two, only two nufus, only two conditions of the nafs, which are al-ghadabiyya and al-shahwaniyya. However, al-nafs al-natiqa also has a share from it. So he says a human being, understanding a human being or deeper conditions of a human being, in particular the sources of these akhlaq, the sources of human behavior, how a human being acts in different conditions, in different situations, or normally different age groups, how a child acts, the difference between the behavior of men and women. This is a deep ocean. This is a deep ocean. That's why a human being has been called al-alamu saghir, a mini cosmos, a mini world. And this is the opinion of many Muslim scholars and philosophers who explain this masala. They say whatever is in the heavens and the earth, if you reflect, it has been placed in a human being. A human being is a mini cosmos. So for example, they give the example of streams. They say streams in the physical world, they resemble the bloodstream of a human being. So he says here, ولذلك الإنسان فيما ذكرنا فإن أمر المملكة نذير لما خلق الله عز وجل عليه الإنسان فيما ذكرناه. What Allah has created in this mamlaka, in this kingdom, the new universe, the cosmos, it resembles a human being. حتى إن قوما سموه العالم الصغير. That's why some scholars have called it mini cosmos. Okay, so understanding his conditions or deeper conditions of his nafs requires a deep engagement with the human being. And he's explaining this in the fourth type, yani understanding the analogy between these three nufus. So this is what I said. This is missing in the West. Subhanallah, that's why I have said many times that the West has disconnected even from its own legacy, from the early Greek legacy, which was better or more profound than what we have now in the post modernism philosophy of the West. Or you can say three posts: postmodernism. It has completely turned into a materialistic civilization. So understanding the deeper conditions of the nafs and the analogy between these deeper conditions, how do they react with each other, how do they affect the behavior of a human being, is important to understand the akhlaq or overall behavior of a human being. So he compares it with a kingdom in which we have a very intelligent king who organizes all affairs of the kingdom in a balanced manner. He says, إن أفضل أحوال المملكة أن يكون ملكها تام العقل والدين والمعرفة. The best condition of a kingdom, or the best kingdom, is the one in which the king is perfect in aql and religion, in intellect and religion, and experience, knowledge. والحرص على صلاحها والعدل فيها. And he has strong inclination towards reforming his kingdom and practicing justice in it. وقوة الرأي وشهامة النفس. And on top of that, he is very strong in his opinion. He does not have doubts. وشهامة النفس. And he is generous in his nafs. مع ذلك وإن يكون أمراؤه وقواده وسائر أجناده وأعوانه في نهاية الطاعة. And all his ministers, the army, and those who are subservient to him, they are in perfect obedience. Because even if the king is the best, see, subhanallah, the nafsul natiqa, if the intellect is the most perfect, but the other two desires, they don't obey this nafs, it will not lead to desired results. In the same manner, if the king is the most perfect, the best in intellect, and knowledgeable, experienced, but those who are subservient to the king, they don't listen to him, they don't obey him, he cannot do anything in his mamlaka. He cannot establish justice, and his mamlaka will not prosper. So he says they should be في نهاية الطاعة, in the best of obedience. له مع القوة والنجدة وشدة البطش والصبر ويكون العامة على غاية الطاعة. And the commoners, the subjects, also should be subservient and best in obedience, with fear of the king and his army. And if this surah is achieved, if this condition is achieved, we can say this is the best mamlaka. This is the best kingdom in which justice, peace, tranquility have been achieved. Same applies on the human being. That's why human being has been called al-alamu saghir. And then he goes on discussing about the analogy between these three nufus, which is a very deep discussion. Towards the end of this chapter, he again connects it with the physical condition. He does not neglect the physical condition, which is important. He does not say, well, the source of akhlaq are only inner conditions of the nafs. He connects it always with the physical condition, because he was was a medical doctor and an expert of medicine, as we have discussed. He says what is going on in the inner realms of the nafs affects the physical condition of a human being, and what happens or what is achieved by the body in the form of food, eating and drinking, the desire, the sexual desire, what we see by our eyes, what we hear by our ears, it also affects the inner condition. So this is al-zahir and al-batin are interconnected. So he says وَكَذَا فِي الْأَصْلِ وَاللَّذَّاتَ الْبَدَنِيَّة, the physical desires, وهي المأكل والمشارب, مآكل والمشارب والمناكح, which are eating, drinking, and the sexual desire, والتمكن من المبالغة فيها, and trying to achieve exaggeration in it. Yani we try our best to we exert our effort to eat the best food and to achieve the best desires. بما يجري الشرور والحروب في الدنيا. It is the source of evils and warfare in this dunya بين الناس بسبب هذه الأحوال. يعني evils and battles and wars happen in this dunya between human beings due to these the physical desires. لا غير. And there is no other reason. This is the only reason due to which الشرور, evils, happen between human beings. والجمهور من الناس والأكثر منهم لهذا الوصف والأقل عددا هم من تكون النفس الناتجة فيه هي القاهرة. So he says, now he gives up last statement or the summary of this chapter. He says the real akhlaq or the balance in morality is when النفس الناطقة is in control, as we said. But when we reflect on the conditions of human beings in history, we conclude that the majority of human beings, they don't have النفس الناطقة in control, but rather the two other nufus, النفس الغضبية and النفس الشهوانية, are in control of the intellect or the intellectual capability. For this reason, there is a lot of shar, evil, and what he calls wars and other forms of evils between human beings. So he says the majority are of this quality, who exert their efforts in achieving the best physical desires, which leads to shurur, which leads to evil. And only few have achieved balance in these qualities, which means in them النفس الناطقة is in control. So he says it here. He says this is the condition ومن الناس والأكثر منهم لهذا الوصف. The majority has this quality. والأقل عددا هم من تكون النفس الناطقة هي فيه هي القاهرة. And the minority of the human beings are those in whom النفس الناطقة is in control, is the dominant. بين البهيميين, on the other two conditions of the nafs. وهم الفلاسفة, and they are the philosophers, والفضلاء. وهم بالقياس إلى من بالصفة الأولى يسيرون. They are the people of intellect, the people of hikmah. فضلاء, the people of virtue, because fadl means virtue, and they have achieved balance in their ethics, or they are at the highest ethical standard. Now again, this is very peculiar to the Islamic worldview. In Islamic ethics, we don't only talk about the principles, the vague and theoretical principles, as standards of ethics, as standards of morality, but also we have certain human beings who serve as best examples of morality for us. Now this is specific with Islamic worldview. You will not see this principle in the Western ethics. And they don't have, they discuss, they have the nazariyat, they have their certain uh, theories about ethics, but they don't have human beings who can serve as the best examples, because religion is not involved. When we say human beings, at the highest standard are the prophets, al-fudala, they are the best fudala. So we have human beings who share the same desires, who share the same anatomy, who share the same physical realm and the inner realm with us. They are not angels. They are not beings of a different realm. They are the same human beings. However, they are at the highest standard of ethics. And this is the sir, this is the secret in sending prophets in the form of human beings. And in the Quran also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if we would send angels as prophets, we would turn them into human beings. We would send them as human beings, because we can connect with human beings. So in Islamic ethics, with the moral code we have, the principles we have, the best standard of morality for us are certain human beings who in their life achieve balance in morality, and they become the beacon of light and enlightenment for all human beings to follow. However, they are in minority. So he says, وَلَوْ كَانَ عَدَدُ الْفُضَلَاءِ هُوَ الْأَكْبَرُ وَعَدَدُ الْجُهَالِ الْأَقَلُّ لَقَلَّ الشَّرُّ وَبَطَلَ أَكْثَرُهُ. If the number of fudala, the number of virtuous people, those who achieved balance in morality, would be more, so they would be in the majority, and the number of ignorant would be aqal, and those who have not achieved balance in their morality, or technically speaking, those who in whom an-nafsul natiqa is not dominant. If the number of fudala would be more and the number of ignorant would be less, لَقَلَّ الشَّرُّ وَبَطَلَ أَكْثَرُهُ. The evil would be less, or the majority of the evil which we see in the world in different forms would vanish, would disappear. So this is the summary of the second chapter. Now, comparing with the Western reality, yani in the West, they have some certain meta-ethical narratives or nazariyat theories, which have turned the ethical question into a very complex mas'ala. Because as we have said, they separate God and religion, and understanding the deeper conditions of the human being from this area, which makes it more complex, which makes the answer of the ethical question, which is ethical objectivity possible? Is moral objectivity possible? Moral objectivity. Or objectivity in morality. Let's make it simpler. Objectivity in morality possible? This is the main question. The answer to this question has become very complex in the West. And if you study the ethical, the contribution of the Western philosophers to ethics, or the meta-ethical narratives, you will be confused. You will see a lot of chaos, because the answer to this question is impossible without involving a higher reality, which is beyond the physical reality of a human being, without involving religion, without involving God, without involving the inner realities of a human being, which are beyond the physical reality. So as I said, in Islamic worldview, the question, the answer to this question is very simple. So we have certain Western philosophies in ethics, like moral relativism, moral nihilism, moral objectivity. Inshallah, we'll point to that while we proceed in this discussion. However, the main problem is that they don't involve religion in understanding these matters, and which has led to a confusion between their circles also. Because a human being, whether he's Western or Eastern, whether he's religious or non-religious, Muslim or disbeliever, practices basic form of morality in his life. He takes moral decisions in his life. You will not find any human being, irrespective of religion, creed, color, race, who does not take moral decisions in life, who does not practice at least a simple form of morality in his life. Now, this is the dilemma for them, because they have to engage in give and take and compromise with the religion or the dominant culture. Usually, the source of this morality is usually religion or the culture in a particular place. So let's talk about moral relativism briefly, in order to understand what I mean by chaos and confusion in their thought. For example, and then we compare with the discussion our scholars had. So we have moral relativism as a dominant Western meta-ethical narrative, or dominant Western philosophy in ethics. So moral relativism insists that the idea of absolute moral truth, independent of facts about specific cultures and societies, and not just human nature, is incoherent. Again, moral relativism suggests or insists that the idea of absolute moral truth, independent of facts about specific cultures and societies, and not just human nature, is incoherent, and it does not exist. So moral facts, morality exists, moral truth exists, but it is linked with a particular culture or a particular society, or it's subjective to a particular culture or a particular society. Moral relativism does not deny the existence of moral truths, but rather moral relativism suggests that there are multiple moral truths which are subjective to their cultures and conditions and societies. This is the claim. So there is no moral truth beyond the human condition. So there are no moral principles which are not subjective to a particular culture or linked with a particular culture or society, which must be followed by all human beings. Now, this is a big problem, because the philosophy of moral relativism will also fall into the same category. So when we don't know which of the moral codes or the moral philosophies is ultimate truth, because there is no ultimate truth, how can we confidently declare moral relativism or this philosophy to be truth? Because at the end, it is also a claim. So this takes them to the discussion of moral authority. Does moral authority exist, or is moral relativism true? If there is no ultimate morality beyond a particular culture or a society, it means moral authority also does not exist, because the authority in a particular moral code should be based on something which is beyond culture or particular condition, human condition. So moral authority, does it exist? Or what is the difference between being an authority and being an authority? Or in other words, does moral expertise exist? So when we say there is no authority in morality, because all moral codes as practiced in the world are correct. This creates a lot of confusion and chaos, and it makes the answer more complex, because there are certain people in the world who are doing evil according to the belief of a certain people. So for me, this person is doing evil, and the arguments against moral relativism, which are used against this philosophy, one of the famous arguments, they call it argumentum ad nauseam, the Nazi argument, you may call it. Because what Hitler did and what Jews are doing now, it is valid according to their own morality. They may think that it is justifiable for them, but for us, it is evil. Now, when we accept that there are multiple moral codes and multiple moral authorities, can we accept? Yeah, there will be a conflict. So what is evil for us, we have to accept it also, because for them, as we said, it is subjective to a particular culture. So in their culture, in their belief, it is valid for them. It may not be valid for me. And now this takes to another dilemma, which is the ethic of toleration. How much should we tolerate? What should we tolerate? Yani, can I tolerate when I say all moral codes are valid? So should I tolerate all types of moral codes? What about moral codes, which may loosely be called moral codes, which are based on evil? This particular nation may have turned their behavior, and they may have turned into animals. They may have adopted ideologies which are anti-human, like the Jewish ideology, Zionist ideology in our times. Anti-human, anti-everyone, except the Jewish race, except the Zionists. They may have adopted extremist ideologies which may pose a threat to all mankind or a particular section of the society. Can we accept that also? So what should be the ethic of toleration? How much should we tolerate? So if we set limits to toleration, again, we are destroying the primary premise, which is moral relativism. So when we say, no, I will tolerate this much, or I will tolerate these moral codes, and I will not tolerate those moral codes. I will tolerate this behavior, and I will not tolerate that behavior. You're going against your philosophy. That moral codes are relative and subjective. For this reason, because of these questions and dilemmas and chaos in this philosophy, what is the reason of the chaos and confusion? The reason, as I said, is because they want to understand it away from God, religion, and the inner conditions of a human being. This is the main reason. But they realize that there is chaos and confusion and problem in these premises. That's why they try to refine it more and more, to create a refined version of moral relativism. So for some, morality is nothing but a tool for advancing the interest of the dominant group. And this is one idea in moral relativism, which I said morality is subjective. Now this subjective to a nation, to a culture, may be based on different whims and desires. So for some, morality is nothing but a tool for advancing the interest of the dominant group. The dominant group, for its interests, the dominant group in a particular society, to advance its interest, it creates a certain type of morality, so that the people remain passive and control remains in their hands. So according to this philosophy, there is literally speaking nothing to know about right and wrong conduct. I will not mention the philosophers who, whether they are European, American, or British, who promoted these ideas. We just have to look at the summary. This is also called subjectivism. This is also called subjectivism. So they try to refine it more and more in order to create a refined version of moral relativism. So for example, arguing moral relativism from the perspective of cultural diversity. Now we have cultural diversity, and they involve these ideas basically, which we take for granted in the Muslim world and Muslim understanding. These terms, freedom, cultural diversity. Cultural diversity is a very common term now, which is applied in our schools also. You will see in the Muslim world, they teach this. It's very common to create toleration, to create this ethic of toleration between human beings. They teach kids different cultures and different, you will see the pictures of different, the kids with attire, the children, the pictures of children with attire of different religions. Cultural diversity. Again, it is based on the same idea of moral relativism. Like cultural diversity, we accept each other. We may not practice each other's culture. We may dislike some aspects of some particular cultures. However, we accept it. So we tolerate it. In same way, we should look at the moral philosophy or morality. So arguing moral relativism from the perspective of cultural diversity. And there are critics of relativism also. Inshallah, we'll move to that and explain while we proceed in this discussion. So some say, for example, some critics of relativism are apt to remark that the doctrine is really a smokescreen for the abject abasement of one's own culture and the elevation of the virtues of others. So eventually, when you, what is the ma'yar, what is the yardstick of this toleration? You may sink so much into this ethic of toleration that you abase your own culture in order to elevate the virtues of others. These are some thoughts about this one meta-ethical doctrine, which is called moral relativism. And there are others who will come to that. For example, moral nihilism. So in moral relativism, they accepted that more than they accepted the truth of morality in principle. Moral truth exists, but there are multiple moral truths which are subjective. So we don't have principles which go beyond this subjectivity, which can be applied to all human beings, or they should do it. On the opposite, we have moral nihilism. This philosophy rejected all claims of moral truths. Moral truth does not exist. So on and so forth. Inshallah, we will incorporate this discussion with the readings of this beautiful text. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding and give us sincerity in ilm and amal. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our fasts and ibadat, siyam and qiyam in this blessed month. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His beautiful names and exalted attributes to cure our sick, accept our martyrs, and forgive all our dead. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabi al-ummi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.